Welcome to week 6 of Biblical Worldview 1. This is a continuation of our discussions through the Old Testament story. And last week, in week 5, we had basically ended with the period of the time of the judges. And we're just going to continue, and I hope you're keeping up with your reading. And another key component of this is I upload little 7 and 8 minute videos from the Bible Project, and I really encourage you to listen to those, because in like 8 minutes you can get a summary of one of these books that might take you quite a bit longer to read, and you get a good summary of those books. And so please pay special attention to those as we work our way through it. This section of the narrative starts out rather quietly, and we begin by reading about a young woman named Ruth, and then of course then we contrast that at the end with King Solomon, who was living in such wealth and affluence that goes beyond imagination. And this section basically has 5 main characters. There is Ruth, there is Samuel, there is Saul, David, and Solomon, with David playing the central and most significant role in this section. But one of the things that we also need to remember is that the other main character in this section is God himself. And as we read the book of Ruth, God is kind of in the background, and he's blessing this woman from Moab, and then he reaches out, of course, to the young boy Samuel, and then God moves from a background role to become a major character throughout the lives of Saul, David, and Solomon, which would constitute what is known in Old Testament studies as the United Kingdom or the United Monarchy. And so it's a very, very intriguing part of Old Testament history. Remember what happened in the book of Joshua, where Joshua leads the Israelites into the promised land, and they defeated all of their major opponents. And when the book of Joshua ends, Joshua basically has uh, issued a challenge to the Israelites to continue to follow in faith and following God. And of course, the next generation fails to do that. And when we read by the end of the book of Judges, for instance, the Israelites have become just like the people that they were supposed to drive out. And they sink about as low morally and theologically as a people can sink. And we ask the question, okay, why didn't God do something? And who's going to rescue the people from this state? And the answer is very simple. It's David. David is the hero that God raises up to save the nation from all of these self-inflicted uh, uh, choices. But God introduces David quietly by first working behind the scenes in the story of Ruth. Now, the book of Ruth is a contrast to the horrific events in the book of Judges, and the book of Ruth is a love story. And there are no kings, there's no warriors, there are no battles or great military victories in the book of Ruth. There's only the quiet story of 2 simple but faithful women, Ruth and her mother-in-law, Naomi. And Ruth marries an Israelite, and there she and another Moabite girl married the 2 brothers who are the sons of Elimelech and Ruth and Naomi. And something happens, and all the men in the story are killed. And Naomi makes the decision to go back to Israel, and she of course, encourages her two daughters-in-law to stay in Moab and to marry again and raise children. But Ruth refuses. And in that very famous passage, where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And so we see the commitment and the loyalty of Ruth to stay with her mother-in-law. And so uh, they return to Israel, and through a series of events, Ruth marries Boaz, kind of an older landowner there. And the reason why this story is so important is because uh, Ruth and Boaz marry. They have a son named Obed. Obed has a son named Jesse, and Jesse, of course, is the father of David. And Ruth chapter 4, verses 13 through 17 give us that as a summation. And the essence of the book of Ruth is really an introduction to David. And of course, David will come on the scene a little bit later, but because he will be the one who will deliver Israel out of this cultural disaster that we see at the end of the book of Judges. Samuel now is introduced in the two books that bear his name, and again, I would encourage you to watch the summary videos by the Bible Project. And Samuel plays kind of a transitional and an introductory role from the role of the judge to that of the monarchy. And Samuel will wear three hats. He will serve as a judge, a priest, and a prophet. And when we combine the closing of the book of Judges with the opening chapters of the book of First Samuel, we come to the conclusion that things are really bad. The tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant are at the city of Shiloh, but you've got an incompetent priest by the name of Eli, and he has two sons who are disgraceful and are a complete disaster when it comes to their work. And so Samuel comes on the scene, and he functions as the last of the judges. And as the slide points out, he's also a priest. And then Samuel also kind of introduces us to this emerging role of the prophet. And part of the role of the prophet will be to anoint the kings in succession. And Samuel will anoint the first two kings. And verse verses 4 and 5 of 1 Samuel 8 is a critical text. All the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and they said to him, "You're old, your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." Now, this is extremely critical because when you look at the attitude of the people, it's very revealing. Now, the elders of the nation have told Samuel three things. One, you're old. Well, that was true. He was. Secondly, your sons do not follow your ways. In other words, we don't want to have to deal with your wicked sons as our leaders. That too is true. But the issue was this last part: appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. You see the reversal here, and that is God had told them at the time of the conquest, you go in and you drive out all these other nations. In fact, throughout the book of Leviticus, he basically reminded them and said, you will not be like the nations around you. But now look at what they're telling Samuel: appoint for us a king. Why? Because we want to be like all the other nations around us. And it's, to think that peer pressure is only something that teenagers deal with. Well, uh, that's a misnomer, because adults deal with peer pressure all the time. And I think a lot of times it's so prominent within the religious world. We have created the term syncretism, and syncretism simply means this is when the instead of the church making inroads and having an influence over the culture, it's the other way around. The culture begins to make inroads into the church. And so Samuel is insulted. He goes before God and says the people are doing this, and God's told Samuel, allow it, because they've not rejected you. Ultimately, they have rejected me. And so this sets into motion then the appointment of the first king. And that they said in verse 20, if you look at that in 1 Samuel chapter 8, they wanted a king who can go out before us and fight our battles. And although this indicates a lack of trust in God, God allows it. And so they Samuel is directed by God to anoint Saul as the first king of Israel, and he started out in a good way. He was tallest of all the men of Israel. In fact, the Bible describes him as a head taller than anyone else. 1 Samuel chapter 9 and verse 2, which would have made him, already from a physical standpoint, a you know a likely candidate. Uh, Verse 4 of chapter 8, Kish had a son named Saul, as handsome a young man as could be found anywhere in Israel, and he was a head taller than anyone else. And so he's anointed, and the Bible is very clear to point out that the Spirit of the Lord was upon him. We don't really have opportunity right now to talk about the role of the Holy Spirit in this section of the Bible, but he makes these cameo appearances, and they're not very numerous, but when the Spirit is present, it's significant. And so God gives Saul the Spirit to empower him, and because of that, uh, Saul has some success as a military leader. There was some military success early on, and the people were elated with that. Saul mustered them at Bezek. The men of Israel numbered 300,000, and those of Judah 30,000. And they told the messengers, "Say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, by the time the sun is hot tomorrow, you will be rescued." And the messengers went, reported this, and they were elated. They said to the Ammonites, "Tomorrow we will surrender to you, and you can do to us just whatever you like," which was a ruse. And here again, you can read the text. There was a tremendous battle. The Ammonites were defeated, and those who survived were scattered, so that no two of them were left together. That's a resounding victory on the part of Saul. And then initially, uh, Saul adhered to the wisdom and the advice and the support of Samuel, but it turns rather quickly. He makes three major mistakes. The first one, recorded in 1 Samuel 13, was that he uh, grew impatient, and instead of waiting for Samuel to offer sacrifice in disobedience, Saul does it. Well, Saul was not a priest. He was not even of the right tribe, but he very pridefully took that position. Second mistake, chapter 14, right in the middle of a battle, he makes a foolish vow, and had he fulfilled it, he would have killed his own son Jonathan. There's a third mistake recorded in chapter 15. Saul was directly ordered to destroy the Amalekites, and he disobeyed. And for God, that was the last straw. You have, verse 26, you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you over Israel. And so now God is going to have Samuel anoint another king as Saul's replacement. And the Bible is really clear on this. And in fact, there's a very descriptive term when God tells Samuel that he's rejected Saul and now he must find one to anoint, a man who would be after God's own heart. And that, of course, is the very famous King David. And we will discuss David in part 2.